She ran into an old mansion to hide from her abusive husband. But what she didn't know was that the house belonged to a mafia boss who had been hunting her husband for years. One wanted to own her, the other wanted to use her. But in the crossfire between danger and desire, she found herself falling for the monster the world feared most. Would you run from him or to him? If you love emotional stories filled with suspense, revenge, and unforgettable romance, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love knowing how far our stories travel. The world ended inside a moving car. One moment his hand rested on her thigh. The next it struck like a verdict. The storm outside felt safer than the man beside her. She threw open the door while the car still rolled, the night swallowing her whole before he could call her name again. The rain came down like punishment, 1,000 needles slashing through the dark. Shania didn't run for freedom, she ran for silence. Her breath came ragged and shallow, her heart thundering louder than the storm chasing her heels. Barefoot, soaked to the bone, her nightgown clung to her like another wound. Behind her, the city lights blurred and vanished into shadow. Behind her, his voice still echoed. The man who swore he loved her while leaving bruises where no one could see. "Shania!" he roared into the storm. "You think you can run from me?" The sound cut through her like glass. She ran faster. Her heel split against the cobblestone. She didn't stop. Blood mixed with rain, washing crimson into the cracks of the street. Her lungs burned, her fingers trembled, her vision blurred. But even through the chaos, one thought carried her forward. Don't go back. When the last streetlight fell away, she saw it. A mansion half-eaten by ivy and silence, its iron gates sagging open like the mouth of a beast. It stood on the edge of nowhere, its windows dark and watching. No other houses nearby, no movement. Just the whisper of thunder and the whisper inside her head saying in there. The gate shrieked as she pushed it open. Lightning flashed, stone angels along the roof, their wings cracked, their eyes blind. She stumbled across the wet gravel, dragging her torn nightgown like a ghost trailing its own shroud. The front doors loomed, carved oak heavy with age. She hesitated, chest heaving, every instinct screaming to turn back. But fear has a cruel way of making ruins look like refuge. She pushed. The door gave. Inside, the air smelled of smoke, leather, and something faintly metallic, not blood, but power. Candlelight trembled across high ceilings. She could hear faint music somewhere deeper in the house, a piano played by invisible hands. The floorboards groaned under her feet as she stepped forward. The mansion didn't feel empty. It felt alive. Her reflection flickered in a cracked mirror, a pale, rain-soaked woman with haunted eyes. For a moment, she didn't recognize herself. The girl who once smiled in public beside a powerful man was gone. In her place stood someone raw, fragile, and feral. Then she heard voices. Low, male, dangerous. They came from a door at the end of the corridor. The faint hum of conversation layered with the clink of glasses and the drag of a match. She froze. Her mind raced. Was this worse than what she'd escaped? Were these men his guards, sent to drag her back? The door creaked open an inch, light spilling into the hall. She pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath. "Shipments through the docks by midnight," a man said, his tone steady, commanding. "If they delay again, cut their payment, permanently." The others murmured assent. Boots scuffed against marble. She risked a glance. Around a long wooden table sat 4 men, all armed, all sharp-eyed. But one drew her gaze like gravity. He sat at the head of the table, cigarette smoke curling through the air around him, his sleeves rolled, forearms veined with control. His face was half-shadowed, but his presence filled the room. Even seated, he looked like the kind of man people obeyed without question. His suit was black, tailored like armor. The glint of a gun lay beside his glass. Wesley. She didn't know his name yet, but she knew his type. The kind who could end lives with a nod, the kind who carried silence like a weapon. One of the men noticed her, a shape trembling in the doorway, and stood abruptly. "Boss." Wesley's head turned. Their eyes met. For a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. His gaze was dark, unreadable, dangerous in its stillness. He didn't move, didn't speak. The air between them thickened until the storm outside felt distant. He rose slowly from his chair, the others falling silent. Shania stumbled backward, her hands raised. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Who are you?" he asked, his voice deep and measured. "No one. I just—" She swallowed hard. "I needed somewhere safe. Please." The men exchanged glances. One of them stepped forward, hand on his weapon. "She's bleeding, boss. Might be a setup." "Please," she whispered again, trembling. "He'll find me." That flicker, the word he, changed something in Wesley's eyes. He studied her for a long, dangerous second, then said quietly, "Lock the doors." The men obeyed instantly. She flinched at the sound of bolts slamming home, panic flaring in her chest. "What are you doing?" He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, his presence almost physical. "You walked into my house, sweetheart. That means you're under my rules now." Tears blurred her vision. "I'll leave, I swear. Just let me stay until morning." He stopped a few feet away, scanning her face as if memorizing every fear written there. Rain dripped from her hair onto the marble floor, tiny crimson dots blooming where her heel had split open. "What's your name?" "Shania." He nodded once. "And who's chasing you, Shania?" Her voice broke. "My husband." That word cracked through the air like lightning. One of his men muttered something under his breath. Another whistled low. But Wesley didn't react. His expression didn't change, though something behind his eyes shifted. A shadow, a memory. He reached into his jacket. She stiffened. Instead of a weapon, he pulled out a handkerchief and crouched. His fingers brushed her ankle lightly, wrapping the cloth around the bleeding skin. She flinched at the touch, but his movements were steady, almost gentle. "You shouldn't run barefoot," he murmured. "The world's full of worse monsters than the one you escaped." She stared at him, words lost somewhere between fear and disbelief. He stood again, towering over her. "Kitchen's down the hall. You'll eat. Then you'll rest upstairs." "I don't want—" wasn't a request. She opened her mouth to argue but stopped. There was something in his tone. Not cruelty but command, carved from a life where mercy was rare and promises were bullets. The other men exchanged knowing looks as he turned back to them. "No one leaves tonight. I want guards on every window. If anyone's looking for her, I want to know before they breathe near my door." "Got it, boss." Wesley faced her again, his voice low, final. "Stay quiet," he said. "You're safe here, for now." And in that charged silence, lightning flashed through the cracked windows, painting the room in silver and shadow. Two strangers bound by danger, by fate, by a storm neither of them yet understood. Have you ever found safety in the most unexpected place? Tell us below. Morning came slow and gray, seeping through the cracks in the mansion's old curtains. The rain hadn't stopped, just softened into a steady whisper that wrapped the world in secrecy. Shania sat at the edge of the massive bed, the unfamiliar scent of tobacco and cedar clinging to the sheets. Her fingers trembled as she traced the frayed hem of her borrowed shirt. It was too big, smelling faintly of soap and smoke. His. Her body ached from the night before, not from running, but from remembering. Every flash of thunder had carried his voice, the husband whose charm had once been worshipped by cameras and crowds. Senator Julian Reeves. To the world, he was virtue incarnate, the man who fought corruption, smiled for children, kissed his wife like devotion itself. But behind the mansion gates and marble walls, love had been replaced with control. Every dress she wore, every word she spoke, every movement of her hand, curated, censored, perfected for his image. Shania had once believed silence was safety, that if she smiled enough, obeyed enough, swallowed enough pain, he'd stop hurting her. But silence only fed him. Every bruise he left, he covered with diamonds. Every scream he caused, he muffled with gifts. And when she'd found the courage to say no, his answer had been a slap followed by a photo op. She sat still, heart still racing even though the danger had not followed her inside. For the first time in years, there were no footsteps outside her door. No locked handle. No man waiting to check if she smiled correctly before breakfast. Only the quiet creak of the mansion and the faraway murmur of voices downstairs. She rose, careful not to make a sound, the hem of the shirt she'd been given brushing her knees. The hall beyond her door was long, lined with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her. Men in suits, women in pearls, none smiling. The air smelled faintly of old cigars and something warmer. Coffee, perhaps, drifting from below. She descended one step at a time, barefoot, her pulse loud in her ears. Then she heard him. "We don't even know who she is," a voice said, gruff, skeptical. "She's nobody," another replied. The third voice, deep, low, steady, cut through them both. "Nobody doesn't bleed on my floor." Shania froze. It was him. Wesley. The man from last night. She could still see the shape of him in her mind. The way he'd watched her without blinking, the power in his stillness. She peeked around the banister. 3 men sat at the long table in the dining hall. The one at the head, Wesley, had changed into a dark shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms. The other 2 were younger, restless. The taller one, with a scar running from temple to jaw, looked like the kind of man who had seen too many wars. "Boss," the scarred man said, "what if she's bait? You think it's a coincidence some half-dead girl shows up while we're settling accounts with the Carver family?" "Could be nothing," said the other. Wesley leaned back in his chair. "Or everything." His tone was quiet, but it made the other men straighten instantly. He set down his cup. "Until we know, she stays here. Melanie will look after her. Nobody touches her. Nobody questions her. Clear?" The men nodded, though unease hung in the air. Shania stepped back, her breath catching. She wanted to thank him, to explain, but explaining meant confessing, and confession had always been used against her. She turned only to find someone standing behind her. A woman, late 50s, sharp eyes softened by kindness. She wore an apron and carried a folded blanket. "You shouldn't be sneaking around, dear," the woman murmured. Shania's throat tightened. I didn't mean..." "It's all right." The woman's smile was faint, but real. "I'm Melanie, housekeeper here, or whatever title the men let me keep." "I was looking for a way out," Shania whispered. Melanie's gaze flicked toward the windows where fog still pressed against the glass. "Out there's no better than in here, at least not until you've got somewhere safe to go." She gestured toward the blanket. "Eat first. The boss said you hadn't." "The boss?" "Wesley," Melanie said simply, as if the name itself carried enough weight to explain everything. Shania followed her back into the kitchen. The space was enormous, old stone walls, heavy iron pans, herbs hanging from the beams. The warmth made her shiver. Melanie placed a plate before her, toast, eggs, fruit. "Thank you," Shania murmured. Melanie studied her quietly. "You ran far, didn't you?" Shania didn't answer. She looked down, focusing on the rhythm of her fork instead of the memory of tires screeching, of a man's hand slamming against the dashboard. Melanie didn't push. She simply patted her shoulder. "Rest a while. The storm hasn't finished with you yet." Down the hall, Wesley stood in his study, staring at the security feed glowing faintly on the old monitors. The woman sat at the kitchen table, small and shaking, framed by the light. Something about her didn't fit the picture of danger. She looked like someone who had been running for a very long time. Gunner, his second in command, entered without knocking. "She awake?" "She's eating." "You sure keeping her's a good idea?" Gunner asked. We don't even know her last name. No ID, no phone, nothing. She's either lost or hiding something. Everyone's hiding something, Wesley said. That's comforting. Gunnar leaned on the desk. So what's the plan? You gonna interrogate her or play savior? Wesley gave him a cold look. You think I do charity work? Gunnar smirked. Not since your brother. Silence dropped like a blade between them. Wesley turned toward the window. Just keep the men quiet. The fewer questions, the better. Gunnar sighed. You got it, boss. But if this goes south, don't say I didn't warn you. When he was gone, Wesley rubbed the bridge of his nose. He didn't like mysteries in his house. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to throw her back into the world she'd run from. Something about the look in her eyes when she'd said please. It hadn't been a performance. It had been survival. By evening, the rain had lifted into mist. Shania wandered through the mansion's west wing. The walls were lined with shelves, books gathering dust. A fireplace cold for years stood half-lit again. She ran her fingers across the spines, whispering the names to herself. Dickens, Bronte, Wilde, words she hadn't dared speak aloud in years. Didn't take you for a reader, a voice said. She spun. Wesley stood in the doorway, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass. I used to read, she said softly, before someone decided what I was allowed to enjoy. His gaze lingered on her face. And what were you allowed? Nothing that made me think. He stepped closer, setting the glass aside. Then start thinking again. She frowned. Why are you being kind to me? I'm not, he said simply. I'm cautious. That's not what last night looked like. He studied her a long moment, then said, You were bleeding. I don't like blood on my floors. She almost laughed, but it caught in her throat. So this is just about cleanliness? It's about control, he said quietly. You learn that, and you survive. Their eyes met, the air between them thickening until the crackle of the fire became the only sound. For a heartbeat, she thought he might ask her who she was running from, but he didn't. He just nodded once, as if to say your secrets are safe, for now. Melanie appeared at the doorway with a folded towel. There's a bath drawn for you upstairs, she told Shania, then glanced at Wesley. She needs rest, not questions. Wesley inclined his head. Make sure she gets both. As Shania followed Melanie out, she heard Gunnar's voice in the hall beyond. Low, wary. You're getting soft, boss. No, Wesley murmured. Just curious. Later, when the house had gone still again, Shania lay in the steaming bath, the scent of lavender rising around her. For the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for a door to open or a voice to shout her name. The silence felt strange, fragile, almost frightening. Downstairs, Wesley poured another drink, staring into the fire. Somewhere above him, a frightened stranger was learning how to breathe again, and though he didn't yet know who she was, or who she had run from, he already knew one thing. Whatever storm had sent her here was far from over. Their worlds had only just begun to collide. The storm returned by nightfall, heavy and unrelenting, as if the world itself refused to forget what had happened. The mansion's halls glowed dim with candlelight, shadows flickering along the cracked walls. Shania sat near the fireplace in the library, wrapped in a wool blanket that smelled faintly of cedar. Melanie had insisted she rest, but rest felt impossible. Every creak of wood, every howl of wind made her pulse quicken. Downstairs, the men gathered again. She could hear them faintly through the floorboards. Low voices, the clink of glass, the steady authority of Wesley commanding the room. They spoke about shipments, about territory, about names she didn't know. But tonight, another name entered the air, one that froze every breath in the house. Julian Reeves, Gunnar muttered, tossing a folded newspaper onto the table. Senator Reeves. Put out a private bounty this morning. Says his wife's been kidnapped. Wesley's head lifted slowly. Kidnapped? Disappeared after an argument last night, Gunnar said. He's calling it a political attack. Offered 50 grand for any information that leads to her return. For a long moment, silence. Then Wesley reached for the paper. His fingers brushed the ink, eyes narrowing at the headline. Senator's wife vanishes. After charity gala, police suspect political threat. Beneath the bold letters was a photo. Julian Reeves, smiling for cameras, hand wrapped around the waist of the woman beside him. The same woman now sitting upstairs wrapped in one of Wesley's blankets. Son of a bitch, Wesley whispered. Gunnar frowned. You know him? Wesley didn't answer right away. He just stared at that polished grin, the one the world adored. Behind that smile, he could almost hear the echoes of a courtroom. His brother's name dragged through dirt, reporters shouting questions, the senator's voice swearing innocence. He could still see his mother crying in the gallery. I know him, Wesley said finally. His voice had gone quiet, too quiet. He's the reason Aaron's dead. Gunnar's face darkened. You're sure? I don't forget faces that lie under oath. The words came out like a vow. Wesley dropped the newspaper, his jaw tight. She's not just some lost woman, Gunnar. She's his wife. Gunnar cursed under his breath. Boss, this changes everything. If the senator finds out she's here, he won't. Wesley's tone cut him off like a blade. She stays under my protection. Nobody tells her I know. Protection? Gunnar's eyes narrowed. Or revenge? Wesley didn't answer. Upstairs, Shania stared at the rain streaking down the window, unaware of the conversation below. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the floor. She pressed her hand to the glass, feeling the chill seep through her skin. Somewhere out there, she knew Julian was searching. He always searched, not because he missed her, but because he owned her. The thought made her stomach twist. He'd never let her vanish quietly, not with his career at stake, not with the secrets she carried. A soft knock startled her. The door creaked open and Melanie peeked in. Eat something, the older woman said gently, placing a tray on the bedside table. You'll need your strength. Thank you, Shania murmured, though her appetite was gone. Melanie hesitated. The men downstairs are on edge tonight. Keep your door locked. Shania looked up sharply. Why? Did something happen? Melanie's lips pressed into a thin line. Nothing yet. But storms bring more than rain in this house. When the woman left, Shania locked the door as told, heart thudding. She sat back on the bed, the silence pressing in like weight. Somewhere beneath that silence she sensed it. A shift, a tension she couldn't name. Wesley stood alone in his study, lightning flashing against the tall windows. The newspaper lay open on his desk. He traced the printed face of the senator with his thumb, remembering his brother's last words before the cell door closed. He swore he'd help me. Said justice always wins. Tell Ma I believe him. Justice had been a joke. Julian Reeves had bought it, twisted it, and left Aaron to rot. Now fate had brought the man's wife to his doorstep. Was it coincidence, or was the universe finally offering him balance? He poured himself a drink, the ice clinking softly. But when he thought of Shania's eyes, haunted, bruised by more than fear, the rage in his chest tangled with something else. She wasn't guilty of her husband's sins. She was collateral, and if Julian wanted her back, that made her both leverage and target. Gunnar appeared in the doorway. You're thinking too hard again. Did you send men to reinforce the gates? Wesley asked. Yeah, but boss, listen, this isn't like the usual jobs. You can't just... I can do whatever I damn well please, Wesley interrupted, voice low. She stays. No one touches her. Not Reeves, not his men. Gunnar studied him for a long moment. You planning to tell her the truth? Wesley's jaw flexed. Not yet. Because you want to protect her? Because if she knows who I am to her husband, she'll run. Gunnar sighed, stepping back. Then I hope you're ready for what comes next. The storm deepened through the night. Rain hammered the windows, wind howling through the cracks in the walls. Downstairs, Wesley's men kept watch, guns close, eyes sharper than usual. They'd heard the bounty was spreading through the underground. Criminal circles, bounty hunters, hired thugs. $50,000 could make desperate men do stupid things. Shania couldn't sleep. The thunder reminded her of Julian's voice, sharp, commanding, impossible to escape. She rose, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders, and walked to the window again. Below, she could see the courtyard, slick with rain. Then she froze. A figure moved through the shadows by the gate. For a second, she thought it was a trick of light, but no. Someone was out there, moving low, moving quiet. Her breath hitched. Before she could react, a loud crash echoed from downstairs, glass shattering, followed by shouting. She stumbled back, heart pounding. "Get down!" A man's voice barked below. Gunfire ripped through the air. Melanie burst into Shania's room a second later. "Stay down! Don't move!" she hissed, pulling her toward the corner. "What's happening?" Shania gasped. "Someone tried the gate. They're inside." Another gunshot, closer this time. Shania flinched. The world tilted. She could hear Wesley shouting orders somewhere below, his tone calm, deadly. The sound of boots thundered through the halls. Melanie crouched beside her, clutching her hand tight. "You're safe here," she whispered, though her voice trembled. "He won't let anyone touch you." The door burst open. Wesley, rain-soaked, weapon in hand. His eyes swept the room until they landed on her. "Stay with Melanie. Do not open that door for anyone but me." She nodded, frozen. He turned, voice sharp over his shoulder. "Gunner, North Hall, now." The men vanished into the storm's roar. Shania pressed her back against the wall, trembling. The thunder outside clashed with the violence inside, and she realized that whatever peace she'd found here was already slipping away. She didn't know yet that the man protecting her had just discovered her husband's name. She didn't know that the bounty on her head had already reached the black markets. All she knew was the sound of gunfire in the night. And the way Wesley's last glance before he vanished looked like a promise of safety, or vengeance. The mansion fell into chaos, the storm howling its approval. And somewhere, beneath the echo of violence, the first threads of trust began to form, fragile, dangerous, and entirely real. Wesley's men were able to fight off the intruders. The days that followed blurred into something quiet but charged, like the calm before a second storm. The bullet holes in the walls had been plastered over, the broken glass swept away, yet the air in the mansion still carried the memory of violence. Wesley had tightened security, replaced his night guards, doubled his patrols. No one spoke of the attack, but everyone felt its echo. Shania could still hear it, the gunfire, the shouts, the way his voice had cut through the chaos like thunder. "Stay with Melanie. Don't open that door for anyone but me." It had been command and promise wrapped in one, and it played in her mind each time she closed her eyes. On the fourth morning, Wesley found her in the library again, tracing her fingers over the same worn spines she had studied since she arrived. "You're up early," he said, stepping into the room. "I didn't sleep." He nodded once, unsurprised. "Nightmares?" "Memories." She hesitated, meeting his gaze. "They're worse than nightmares because they're true." He didn't respond. Instead, he set a small duffel bag on the table and unzipped it. Inside, wrapped hand tape, a pair of fingerless gloves, and a rolled towel. Her brow furrowed. "What's that?" "Training gear." "For who?" "For you," he said. "If you plan on staying alive, you need to learn how to fight back." She blinked. "You think I can fight off men like the ones who broke in?" "I think you can fight off fear," he replied. "And that's harder." There was something in his voice, rough, steady, that made her chest tighten. He wasn't offering pity. He was offering a weapon. The gym was buried beneath the mansion. hidden behind an iron door and concrete walls that smelled faintly of oil and steel. The air was cold. Punching bags hung from chains, targets scarred from years of use. Shania wrapped her hands the way he showed her, slow, careful, her breath trembling in the hollow quiet. Feet shoulder-width apart, he said, circling her like a storm she couldn't escape. Elbows in, chin down. Again. She raised her fists. Good. Now hit the bag. Her first punch landed soft, clumsy. Pain shot through her wrist. Again, he said. She obeyed. Harder. Her second punch hit with sound this time. Again. She kept going, over and over until her arms burned, until her breath came out ragged. Sweat gathered at her temples, her hair clinging to her neck. When she finally faltered, he stepped closer, catching her wrist mid-swing. His hand was warm, rough, steadying. Don't stop when you're tired, he said quietly. Stop when you're done. Her eyes met his, defiance flickering there. You think pain makes you strong? He held her gaze, unflinching. No, but surviving it does. Something cracked open inside her then. Not quite anger, not quite gratitude, but something raw that had nowhere else to go. She punched again, harder this time, and again until the sound filled the room like thunder. When she finally collapsed against the bag, chest heaving, he caught it before it swung back into her. For a heartbeat, they stood close. Too close. She could feel the warmth of his breath, the faint scent of smoke on his skin. Better, he murmured. Are you always this cruel with your students? Only the ones I want to see live. His voice lingered in her head long after he left the room. The training became routine. Morning drills in the gym, evenings by the fire where Melanie coaxed her to eat, nights when Wesley's footsteps echoed down the hall long after everyone else had gone to bed. Something in him had shifted since learning who she was. He didn't treat her like a stranger anymore, but not like an ally either. He kept his distance, always half in shadow, as if too much light might burn away the walls he'd built. Still, she watched him, the way his jaw tightened when he read the news, the way he stood at the window when it rained, silent, unreadable. Once, she caught him staring at an old photograph of two young men beside a car. One of them Wesley, the other wearing the same eyes but a gentler smile. She didn't ask about it. Not yet. By the end of the week, her hands had blistered and healed again. The first time she landed a clean hit on the bag, Wesley gave a quiet nod. It felt like praise, and that frightened her more than the gunfire had. One night, as she practiced alone, Gunnar appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. You've got guts, I'll give you that, he said. Most people in your shoes would have run. I did run, she said. Yeah. But you stopped. He smirked and leaned against the wall. Just be careful. The boss doesn't let people close for a reason. And you, well, you're already closer than most. What's that supposed to mean? Means every time you walk into a room, he forgets to breathe. She stared at him, uncertain whether to laugh or recoil. Gunnar gave a half smile and left her to the silence. When Wesley entered a few minutes later, she didn't tell him what Gunnar had said, but she noticed how his eyes softened when he saw her and how his voice gentled when he said, You're improving. Or maybe your standards are low, she teased, and for the first time he actually smiled. It was a rare thing, that smile, sharp-edged but sincere, and it did something dangerous to her pulse. The danger came days later. A black car stopped just beyond the gates at dusk. Gunnar brought the message himself, an envelope marked with a wax seal, a wolf's head, carved deep, the Carver family's symbol. Rivals, old enemies. Wesley broke the seal, scanning the note. His expression darkened. They're calling a meeting, Gunnar said. Said it's urgent. Did they say why? They said this. The woman you shelter will be your ruin. The words hung in the air like poison. Wesley's jaw tightened. They know. Gunnar hesitated. You think it's a threat or a warning? Both. He folded the note, slipping it into his jacket. Keep extra men on the west side. If they want a war, they'll get one. That night, Shania overheard them from the stairwell, the words carved through her chest, colder than the storm outside. The woman you shelter will be your ruin. She backed away before they could see her. Melanie found her later in the corridor, eyes wide, hands trembling. What's wrong, child? I shouldn't be here, Shania whispered. They're right. I'm the reason they attacked. I'm the reason someone might die. Melanie shook her head gently. No, you're not. The world breaks enough people without your help. But the guilt wouldn't fade. That night, Shania packed what little she owned, a coat, a pair of shoes, the shirt Wesley had lent her, and crept down the dark hall. The moonlight traced her path like silver gilt. As she reached the front door, a voice stopped her. Running again? She turned. Wesley stood in the shadows, coat half-buttoned, eyes unreadable. I heard what they said, she murmured. I can't stay. I won't bring you trouble. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. You think leaving fixes that? It keeps you safe. He shook his head. You don't get it. You're not my weakness, Shania. He paused, his voice dropping lower. You're my line in the sand. Let anyone cross it, and I burn the world down. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. Then, softer, he added, so stay, if only to see what happens next. Outside, thunder rumbled again. Inside, two hearts beat in sync with the storm, neither willing to admit what had already begun. And somewhere in that charged silence, trust turned to something dangerously close to desire. The house was too quiet that night, too still as though it was holding its breath. Outside, the storm had finally broken, leaving behind a cold, glassy calm that made every sound echo sharper. Shania couldn't sleep, not after what she'd heard earlier in the day. The warning from the Carver family whispered through the walls like a curse. She had promised herself not to eavesdrop again. But when silence felt louder than truth, promises meant little. She left her room barefoot, the old floorboards cold beneath her feet, and followed the faint glow spilling from the crack under Wesley's office door. Inside, voices murmured low. You sure this is smart, boss? Gunner's tone carried unease. You're sitting on dynamite. One wrong move and Reeves will bury us alive. Wesley's voice was calm. He's already tried. Now I bury him first. Shania froze. Reeves. Her heart stuttered, then pounded so loud she was sure they'd hear it. His name stays off the streets until I say otherwise, Wesley continued. We hit him where it hurts. His reputation, his money, everything he built on lies. You're talking about the senator, right? Gunner said. The same guy's wife you've got sleeping upstairs? A pause. Then Wesley's low, steady reply. She's not the target. He is. But she's leverage, Gunner countered, and you know it. Wesley didn't answer. Something inside Shania broke. She backed away from the door, the world spinning around her. Leverage, target, her husband. All of it tangled into one word that sliced her in half. Betrayal. She stumbled down the corridor, trying to breathe through the dizziness. It all made sense now. The secrecy, the protection, the way Wesley's eyes lingered too long but said too little. She wasn't a guest. She was bait. She reached her room, slammed the door, pressed her trembling hands against her mouth to stop the sob that clawed its way up her throat. The fire in the hearth had gone out, leaving only the faint smell of smoke and memory. He had saved her to use her. She paced the room like a trapped bird, fury mixing with heartbreak. She wanted to run, to disappear again, but her body wouldn't move. Her mind wouldn't stop showing her every quiet moment they'd shared, every training session, every word that had sounded like truth. When she finally found the courage to move, she didn't run. She went back to his office. The door was unlocked now, the room empty. Papers covered the desk in neat, deliberate stacks. A single lamp cast golden light over the dark wood. Her gaze landed on a leather folder stamped with a seal she knew too well, her husband's crest. Reeves Enterprises. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were files, financial records, offshore accounts, photos. Julian's face stared back at her from glossy prints, shaking hands with men she recognized from headlines, men accused of laundering and worse. And there, at the bottom, one photo of her, taken at a gala months before she'd fled. She stood beside her husband, his arm around her waist, her smile brittle and practiced. A note scribbled beneath in Wesley's handwriting. Collateral. Connection to Reeves. Possible access point. She dropped the folder like it burned her. Footsteps echoed behind her. Wesley's voice came quiet, even. "I was going to tell you." She turned sharply. "When? Before or after you destroyed me too?" He stepped closer, rain still dripping from his coat. "You weren't supposed to find that." "But it's true, isn't it?" she snapped, voice breaking. "All of it. You kept me because of him, because you wanted to use me to get to Julian." "Yes," he said simply. The word hit her harder than any slap ever had. She laughed, cold, sharp. "At least you don't lie about it." "I lied about plenty," he said quietly. "Then what am I, Wesley?" she demanded, her eyes bright with fury. "A weapon? A pawn in your war? Tell me." He moved closer, stopping just out of reach. "At first, yes. You were a means to an end. I wanted revenge. I wanted him to suffer, but then..." He faltered, the first crack in his armor showing. "Then what?" she pressed. "Then I saw you," he said, voice low, rough with truth. "Not the senator's wife. Not the perfect woman in his photographs. I saw you, bleeding, terrified, still fighting to stand. And I realized I didn't want to use you. I wanted to protect you, even if it ruined everything else." She stared at him, tears trembling at the edge of her lashes. "You don't get to say that," she whispered. "You don't get to play savior after making me your weapon." "I'm not playing anything." "Then what is this?" she said, gesturing to the scattered files. "Because all I see is proof that I was just another part of your plan." He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. "Plans change." Her chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm. "You think you can just tell me that and fix everything?" "No," he said, "but I can tell you this. If I had to choose between revenge and you, I'd burn the whole damn world before I let him touch you again." She flinched. The honesty in his tone cut deeper than lies ever could. "Don't," she said, shaking her head. "Don't twist this into something noble." "I'm not trying to," he said softly. "I'm trying to tell you that what started as vengeance turned into something I can't undo." She took a step back, her heart warring with her mind. "You used me. And you changed me," he said. "That's not something I planned." For a long moment, neither moved. The storm outside had returned, low thunder rolling like an echo of their anger. Then, without warning, she shoved the papers off the desk. They scattered across the floor like snow. "Stop pretending this is about me," she said, her voice trembling. "You wanted to destroy him. You still do. And when it's over, when you've had your revenge, what happens then?" He didn't answer. Her laugh came sharp and broken. "Exactly." She turned toward the door, but he caught her wrist. Not roughly, not to stop her, but like someone holding on to the last piece of something fragile. "Don't walk away like I didn't mean any of it," he said. "You're the first thing in years that's made me remember what it feels like to want something that isn't destruction." His hand trembled against her skin. The air between them thickened, electric, heavy with everything unsaid. "Let go," she whispered. "I can't." Her pulse quickened, her anger twisting into something far more dangerous. "You hurt me, Wesley." "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the man who doesn't." Her resolve cracked. Fury and longing collided like lightning. He reached up, brushed a strand of hair from her face. She should have pulled away. She didn't. "You hate me," he murmured. "I want to," she breathed. "God, I want to." The next heartbeat vanished between them. Their mouths met, hungry, desperate, defiant. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't tender. It was the kiss of two people who didn't know whether they were saving or destroying each other. When they broke apart, her breath came shallow, her eyes wide. "This doesn't fix anything." "I know," he said, voice raw, "but it's the only truth I have left." She stepped back, trembling. "Then your truth will ruin us both." Wesley didn't stop her this time when she turned and walked out, leaving the papers scattered like a confession he couldn't bury. Outside, the thunder cracked again, shaking the glass in the windows. The world had shifted, and neither of them could ever return to who they'd been before. Would you forgive someone who lied to protect you, or walk away forever? The night was cold and silent, too silent for comfort. The rain had passed, but the storm lingered inside the walls. Shania hadn't spoken to Wesley in 2 days. Their confrontation in his office still burned behind her eyes. The lies, the kiss, the way his voice had cracked when he said he wanted her more than revenge. She hadn't known whether to believe him or hate him for it. By midnight, she couldn't take the walls anymore. The mansion had become a maze of ghosts and questions, and she needed air. Just air. So she slipped on a coat, wrapped a scarf around her neck, and stepped out through the back garden. The night mist clung to her skin as she walked through the courtyard, the gravel crunching softly beneath her shoes. The iron gates loomed ahead, half open, rusted at the hinges. She paused, her breath clouding in the cold. Somewhere deep in her chest, a whisper warned her to go back. But the ache in her head drowned it out. She only wanted a moment to think, to remember who she was before she became a pawn in someone else's war. She didn't see the men until it was too late. A gloved hand clamped over her mouth. Another wrenched her arms back. A black van waited just beyond the hedges, its engine idling low. She tried to scream, but the sound was swallowed by the night. "Got her," a voice hissed. "The senator wants her alive." Julian. Her blood ran cold. She kicked, twisted, fought like Wesley had taught her, landing one hit square in a man's ribs. But there were too many of them. A blow to her side stole her breath. The world spun. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the glow of the mansion's windows. Safe, warm, unaware. Then a spark. Then fire. Inside, Wesley was pacing the study, a half-empty glass on his desk. Gunnar was speaking, but his words blurred. All Wesley could think of was Shania's face the night she'd found the files, the betrayal in her eyes, the way she'd walked out as though every part of him was poison. He'd let her go because he thought she needed space. He hadn't imagined the silence would feel like this, like loss before death. "Boss," Gunnar said sharply, "you listening?" Wesley looked up. "We got movement at the gates. 2 cars, no ID, no lights." His stomach dropped. "How long ago?" 10 minutes, maybe less." "Find her," he snapped, already grabbing his gun. Before Gunnar could move, the explosion hit. The force threw them both to the ground, glass shattering, smoke flooding through the hall. Fire roared up the western wing, swallowing the walls in seconds. Men shouted, alarm screamed, and the mansion, the fortress that had stood untouchable for years, began to fall apart. "Shania!" Wesley roared, shoving through the smoke. "Shania!" Flames licked the staircase, devouring wood and memories. He didn't care. He tore through the halls, calling her name until his throat bled. Every door he opened was empty, every room a tomb. Gunnar's voice rang out behind him, shouting orders to evacuate, but Wesley didn't stop. When he reached the courtyard, he froze. The gate hung open. Tire tracks cut through the mud. "No," he whispered. Gunnar appeared beside him, coughing through the smoke. She's gone, boss. They took her. Wesley's vision blurred red. Who? Reeves' men. Has to be. The firelight flickered across his face, and something inside him broke. The man who'd spent years building an empire from ash now watched it crumble again, this time with the only thing he cared about burning with it. When Shania woke, her wrists were bound. The room was dark, the air thick with damp. The floor beneath her was concrete, the walls bare. Somewhere water dripped steadily. Her head throbbed. She tried to move, but the rope bit into her skin. Woke up sooner than expected, a voice drawled. She looked up. Two men stood by the door, both armed. One smirked, holding his phone toward her. On the screen was a photo. Her, unconscious, blood on her lip. Your husband'll pay good to keep you breathing, the man said. Don't make this hard. Her husband. Julian Reeves. The man who had sworn to love her before he started breaking her piece by piece. Where is he? She whispered. The man laughed. On his way. You'll see him soon enough. The words made bile rise in her throat. She turned her face away, forcing the fear down. Wesley's voice echoed in her mind. Don't stop when you're tired. Stop when you're done. She twisted her wrists, ignoring the sting. She wasn't helpless anymore. Not the same woman who'd run barefoot through rain. If Wesley could teach her to fight, she'd teach herself to survive. But as hours passed, one question kept circling her thoughts. Had he known? Had he traded her to get to Julian? When the door finally opened again, she expected the senator. Instead, it was him. Julian Reeves, impeccably dressed, smiling as though the world still adored him. Darling, he said softly, stepping closer. You look terrible. She glared at him, every memory of his cruelty flashing through her mind. The bruises, the lies, the way he'd called her weak while hiding behind cameras. What do you want? She said. He crouched down, his smile never fading. I want you home. She spat at his shoes. I'd rather die. He chuckled. You almost did, but you'll learn. You always do. He reached out to touch her face. She flinched. Julian sighed. And to think I thought the man you ran to was smarter. Wesley Thorne, the ghost of the underworld. He wanted me destroyed, and all it took was you to deliver him the perfect distraction. Shania froze. You're lying. He smiled wider. Aren't I always? Her stomach twisted. No, she whispered, shaking her head. He wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Julian murmured. Use you? You're naive, sweetheart. That man's been playing his game longer than you've been pretending to live. His words sank like knives. But even through the blur of anger and tears, she felt something else. Doubt. Not in Wesley. In herself. Because what if Julian was right? By dawn, the mansion was nothing but smoke and ruin. The once imposing gates now hung twisted and blackened. Wesley stood in the wreckage, his hands cut, his coat torn. Firefighters had long gone. His men salvaged what they could, guns, files, memories, but he didn't move. He stared at the ashes, his mind replaying every second he hadn't been fast enough. She's gone, Gunnar said quietly behind him. Wesley didn't answer. His throat burned. His chest ached. Boss, we'll find her, Gunnar insisted. We always do. Wesley turned then, his eyes hollow. You don't get it, he said hoarsely. She's not a mark anymore. She's the one thing I can't lose. Gunnar exhaled, shoulders sagging. Then we start over. Wesley's gaze drifted back to the ruins, smoke curling like ghosts around the debris. Somewhere in that wreckage lay the ring his mother once wore, a reminder that nothing built on vengeance ever survived. He dropped to his knees, fists curling into the soot. The cold rain began again, hissing as it struck the embers. For the first time in years, Wesley Thorne prayed, not for revenge, not for power, just for one more chance. In a windowless cell miles away, Shania pressed her forehead against the concrete, her body shaking from exhaustion. Every sound made her flinch. Every creak of metal made her brace for pain. She didn't know if Wesley was alive, or if the fire had claimed him. She closed her eyes, whispering to the dark. "You told me not to stop when I was tired, so I won't." She didn't know that at that same moment, in the ashes of his broken empire, Wesley whispered her name too, his voice a promise carried through smoke and rain. Two hearts, both believing the other gone, both burning for the same thing. Not vengeance, not redemption, each other. The first sound Shania heard when consciousness returned was dripping water, slow, steady, cruel. It echoed through the dim cell like a clock marking every second she'd lost. Her body ached, her wrists were raw from the rope, her throat dry from screaming. She had no idea how many days had passed, only that the darkness was beginning to feel like a second skin, but something inside her had changed. The fear that once swallowed her was gone. What replaced it wasn't anger, it was clarity. She thought of Wesley's voice, low and sharp during training. "Pain doesn't make you strong. Surviving it does." She'd survived worse than this, and she wasn't done yet. When the guard opened the door, the blinding light made her flinch. He grunted, tossing a piece of stale bread onto the floor. "Eat. Your husband's coming tomorrow. Wants you cleaned up for the cameras if he changes his mind." The words made her blood freeze. Cameras. Change his mind. Julian wasn't just going to keep her. He was going to use her. Again. As soon as the door shut, she moved. The guard had left the latch loose, confident she was too weak to fight. She tore at the ropes with her teeth until blood filled her mouth, until the fibers began to fray. Each second was agony. Each breath burned like fire. When the rope snapped, she felt it, not victory yet, but freedom beginning to whisper. She waited for nightfall. When it came, she acted. The guard came again, yawning, distracted by his phone. She hid in the corner, the broken rope wound around her hand like a weapon. The moment he stepped close, she moved, fast, silent, striking the way Wesley had taught her. A sharp blow to the throat, a twist of his wrist, and he was down before he could shout. Her hands shook as she grabbed his keys. She didn't stop to think. She didn't have the luxury. The hallway stretched long and cold, lined with doors she didn't dare open. Somewhere above, voices echoed. She climbed the stairs two at a time, heart hammering. She found the exit unlocked, a sign of arrogance. No one expected her to make it this far. Outside, the night hit her like a slap. The air was sharp with rain and gasoline. She stumbled through the trees barefoot, every step cutting into her skin. But she didn't stop. Freedom hurt, but captivity had hurt more. By dawn, she reached the main road. Cars roared past, indifferent. Her body screamed for rest, but when she saw the billboard ahead, exhaustion turned to fire. Julian Reeves for governor. A man of family, faith, and strength. Her picture, framed in black and white, sat in the corner. Beneath it, "In loving memory of my beloved wife." She stopped breathing. He'd killed her again, this time not with fists or threats, but with lies. Her reflection stared back from the wet asphalt, dirty, bruised, alive. And in that moment, something broke free inside her. He thought she was gone. He thought he'd won. He was wrong. 3 days later, Wesley stood at the edge of what remained of his mansion. The ash had cooled, but the pain hadn't. He hadn't spoken much since the fire. His men worked around the clock to rebuild what could be saved, but he didn't care about the empire anymore. Only her. He'd sent scouts to every corner of the city, paid informants, threatened rivals, but no one had seen her, until now. "Boss," Gunner said, running up the hill, breathless. "You need to see this." He handed over a newspaper. Wesley's eyes narrowed at the headline. "Senator Reeves announces run for governor. dedicates campaign to late wife. A photo beneath the title showed Julian smiling, his hand over his heart, crocodile tears in his eyes. Something inside Wesley went cold. He killed her, he said quietly, and now he's parading her ghost for votes. Gunnar hesitated. You don't know she's gone. Wesley cut in, voice hoarse. And it's my fault. He turned away, staring at the horizon where the smoke had once risen. I swore I'd destroy him for what he did to my brother, but I never thought I'd lose her in the fire, too. Gunnar didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Until the voice came. Then maybe stop mourning me and help me finish what you started. Wesley froze. The voice was raw, raspy, but unmistakable. He turned. She stood at the edge of the rubble, wrapped in a borrowed coat, her hair tangled, her eyes hard as steel. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The world held its breath. Shania. His voice cracked. How? Later, she said. Right now, we end him. He stared at her, disbelief written across every line of his face. You escaped? I learned from the best. He gave a hollow laugh, half awe, half grief. You shouldn't have come back. Then you shouldn't have taught me how to fight, she replied. Because now I'm not just surviving. I'm ready to make him pay. The air between them sparked, not just with old fire, but with something reborn. She told him everything, how Julian planned to announce his campaign, how he was using her death as a symbol of sacrifice. The press loved him. The people pitied him. The truth was buried under speeches and smiles. When she finished, Wesley paced the burned-out study, his mind already moving through plans. We can't kill him, he said finally. Not yet. We need proof. We expose him, and the world will do the rest. Shania nodded. I know where the files are, financial records, offshore accounts, evidence of his deals with the same men who tried to kill me. You think he still keeps them? He's arrogant, she said. He'll keep trophies. He looked at her then. Not the frightened woman he'd once pulled out of the storm, but someone forged by fire. Stronger, sharper. You've changed, he murmured. Good, she said. So have you. Their eyes met across the ruin. The silence between them wasn't fragile anymore. It was charged, alive, built on something real. He stepped closer. You're sure you want to do this? I don't want to, she said softly. I have to. He nodded once. Then we do it together. The plan came together like lightning. Wesley called in his remaining contacts, men who owed him favors, journalists who remembered his family before corruption buried the truth. Shania retrieved the files from a hidden vault in Julian's countryside estate, using credentials she still remembered from her time as his wife. Every page she touched felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. They met in the back room of an abandoned chapel to sort through the evidence. Rain battered the stained glass, the light fractured and cold. Wesley spread the documents on the table. Wire transfers, shell companies, fake charities. He shook his head. Your husband's worse than I thought. He's not my husband anymore, she said. He's just another man who thought he could own me. Wesley's jaw tightened. He'll come for you again when this leaks. Then let him. Her voice was calm, almost dangerous. This time, he won't find the same woman. For a long moment he studied her face, the fire in her eyes, the strength in her voice. She had been broken once, but now she was something else entirely. Shania, he began, his voice low. I thought I lost you. You did, she said softly. But maybe I needed to be lost to find who I was meant to be. He reached out, fingers brushing hers. You're not alone in this. She didn't pull away. I know. Outside, thunder rolled, but this time it didn't sound like an ending. It sounded like a beginning. They stood together before the storm. Two souls reborn from ash, ready to burn down the lies that had chained them. The world thought Shania Reeves was dead. Tomorrow they'd learn she was alive and ready to speak. And when she did, The empire built on her silence would crumble. Because this time, she wasn't running. She was coming back to fight. And beside her, Wesley Thorne wasn't the man who used her anymore. He was the one who would help her rewrite the ending. Together. What would you do if the person who destroyed your life tried to profit from your pain? Would you stay silent or rise and fight back? Tell us in the comments. The gala shimmered with gold and deceit. Chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks, and beneath them, the city's elite moved through the ballroom. Politicians, donors, journalists, all gathered under the same roof to celebrate the Reeves Foundation for Renewal. A perfect name for a man who rebuilt his image on the ashes of his wife's supposed death. Shania watched from the mezzanine, her heart a steady drum against her ribs. Her gown was black, simple, sleek, and deliberate. A funeral dress reborn as armor. Beneath her calm facade, her pulse carried years of silence and humiliation. Julian Reeves stood at the podium, bathed in applause. He wore his usual smile, polished, rehearsed, and soulless. "Tonight," he said into the microphone, "we celebrate hope, second chances, and the resilience of family. My late wife taught me that strength begins at home." The crowd erupted with sympathy, but this time the cameras were not only his. Every chandelier, every stage light, every corner of the room hid a lens Wesley's men had planted hours earlier. Gunnar sat in the control van outside, nodding at his monitor. "We're live," he muttered into the comm. "All eyes on you, Shania." She exhaled slowly. "Let's finish this." Wesley waited in the shadows near the service entrance. He was armed, though not for bloodshed. Not tonight. His plan wasn't revenge anymore. It was revelation. He'd promised her justice, not ruin. Still, his muscles coiled with instinct as he scanned the ballroom through the narrow glass window. The sight of Julian's face ignited 1,000 old wounds. His brother's death. The betrayal that had built this empire of lies. He whispered into the mic, "You sure you're ready for this?" Her voice came through softly. "I've been ready since the night I stopped being afraid." When she entered the ballroom, silence rippled through the crowd like a shiver. Gasps, murmurs, disbelief. Julian froze mid-sentence, his hand tightened on the podium. For a moment he didn't recognize her. The woman walking toward him wasn't the timid wife he'd broken. She moved like thunder wearing silk. "Julian," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "I believe you left my obituary unfinished." He stumbled back, color draining from his face. "Shania." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Alive and well." Surprised? Cameras turned, phones lifted. The air thickened with shock. Julian tried to recover. This is insane. My wife is dead, whoever you are." "Don't," she cut in. "Don't lie again. Not here. Not tonight." She stepped closer, her heels echoing like judgment. "You called me your strength, your tragedy, your loss. But you forgot one thing. I remember everything you did. Every bruise you covered. Every threat you whispered. Every tear you pretended not to see." He hissed through his teeth, voice low. "You're making a scene." "That's the point," she said, eyes blazing. "The world deserves to see the man behind the speeches." The crowd began to murmur louder now, confusion turning into curiosity, curiosity into doubt. Julian's mask cracked. "You think anyone will believe you? You're nothing without me." "Then let's find out," she said. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled as she pulled a small remote from her purse. One click, and the massive screen behind the podium flickered to life. Images appeared, financial documents, offshore accounts, hidden transactions, then recordings. Julian's voice, cold, clear. "If she leaves again, make it permanent. The press will pity me. I'll be untouchable." Gasps filled the room. Reporters surged forward. Julian's face went white. How did you?" "By surviving," she said, "and by remembering everything you taught me about power. He lunged, grabbing her arm, dragging her close. "You think you can destroy me?" The cameras caught it all, his hand tightening, the fury beneath his charm. The truth made flesh, but before he could strike, Wesley burst through the side door, his gun raised. "Let her go, Reeves." The security detail reacted instantly. Guns lifted, chaos erupted. Screams cut through the air as guests ducked beneath tables, champagne shattering across marble floors. "Boss, we've got company!" Gunner's voice barked in his earpiece. Julian shoved Shania aside, pulling a weapon from his jacket. "You shouldn't have come here, Thorne." Wesley stepped forward, shielding her. "You already took enough from me. You're not taking her too." The first shot rang out, then another. Glass shattered, bullets tearing through decorations. Wesley moved fast, pulling Shania behind a column, returning fire with precision. Julian's guards advanced, but Wesley's men stormed in from the side entrance, exchanging bursts of gunfire. The once elegant gala turned into a war zone of flashing lights and panic. "Stay down," Wesley barked. "I'm not leaving you," she shouted back, grabbing his arm. Another shot whistled past. This one aimed directly at him. Shania saw it before he did. Without thinking, she pushed him aside. The bullet grazed her shoulder, spinning her back against the wall. "Shania." She bit down on the pain, blood seeping through her gown. "You said no one touches what you protect," she said, her breath trembling. "But I protect you too." Something inside him cracked open. He pulled her close, shielding her body with his, returning fire until the last guard fell. Then, silence. Julian lay cornered behind the podium, his gun empty, his breath ragged. Wesley raised his weapon. For a moment, the room held its breath again. This was it, the justice both men had chased for years. "Do it," Julian spat. "You think killing me makes you better? You're just another criminal." Wesley's finger hovered over the trigger. His jaw tightened. Shania placed her hand on his arm, her voice soft but firm. "Don't. Not like this." He turned to her, eyes dark with conflict. "You already won," she whispered. "Don't let him take the rest of you." The fury in him trembled, then slowly. He lowered the gun. He exhaled shakily, stepping back. "No. This ends with truth, not blood." Outside, police sirens wailed, drawing closer. Julian tried to stand, but Shania faced him one last time. "You always said I was too weak to leave you," she said. "But I learned that walking away isn't weakness, it's power." He sneered, but his voice cracked. "You'll regret this." "No," she said. "You will." She turned to Wesley, her hand slipping into his, blood still warm between their fingers. Reporters flooded the ballroom as the police swarmed in. Cameras captured everything: the confession, the evidence, the bruised but unbroken woman standing beside the man who refused to let hatred define him. For the first time in years, the light felt clean. As they stepped outside, dawn crept over the horizon, soft and gold. The air smelled like rain and rebirth. Wesley looked at her, eyes full of something wordless. "You saved me in there," he said quietly. She smiled faintly, pain softening into pride. "No, Wesley. You saved us. From becoming what he was." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his hand lingering. "You still want that divorce?" She laughed softly through tears. "From him, yes. From you? Never." He smiled then, slow and real. "Good." And there, amid flashing lights and breaking news, they kissed. Not out of desperation this time, but defiance. Not the end of a tragedy, but the beginning of something earned. Two souls scarred by lies standing together in the truth. Justice wasn't clean, but it was theirs. And for the first time, love was too. The rain was falling again. Soft, steady, almost tender. The kind of rain that once meant fear to her now sounded like absolution. Through the glass of a quiet corner restaurant, Shania watched the droplets race down the windowpane. The city outside shimmered beneath umbrellas and car lights, but inside everything was warm. Muted jazz, the smell of roasted coffee, the quiet laughter of strangers. It had been 6 months since the gala. 6 months since the world saw the truth. 6 months since she stopped living as a ghost. The divorce had finalized 2 weeks ago. Julian Reeves was now a name tied to court trials, public disgrace, and headlines she no longer read. His empire had crumbled, his campaign withdrawn, his power dissolved beneath the weight of his own lies. Shania didn't gloat. She didn't smile when the verdict was read. She had already won the moment she walked away. Today, she was free. Across the city, the banner of her new foundation stretched across the side of a modest brick building, the Phoenix Project, self-defense and shelter for women. Inside its walls, women learned how to fight back, not just with fists, but with courage. Each self-defense class, each story shared, was a small rebellion against silence. Sometimes Shania would stand at the window of the training hall and watch the women laugh after class, bruised but smiling, stronger with each passing day. That was victory enough. And yet some nights, like this one, she still thought of him. Not Julian. Wesley, the man who taught her to fight, the man who saw her strength before she did, the man who had nearly died because he believed in her redemption more than his revenge. She hadn't seen him since the trial ended. After the smoke cleared, they'd both needed time. He, to rebuild a life stripped of corruption. She, to build one from nothing. But there were words between them still waiting to be spoken, and tonight, under the same rain that had once hidden her, those words would finally find breath. The doorbell chimed softly. She didn't turn right away. She didn't have to. She could feel him, like gravity, like heat. Wesley Thorne walked in wearing a dark coat and quiet eyes. The scars on his knuckles had faded, but the look in them hadn't. He spotted her instantly, hesitation flickering across his face before giving way to something gentler. He approached, slowly, respectfully. "You always pick rainy nights," he said, his voice low, the faintest smile ghosting his lips. She gestured to the seat across from her. "Sit." He did, and for a long while neither spoke. The rain filled the silence between them, a rhythm both familiar and forgiving. "You look," he started, then stopped, the word dying on his tongue. "Alive?" she finished for him, smiling softly. He let out a breath, almost a laugh. "Yeah, that'll do." She tilted her head, studying him. "You cleaned up your business." He nodded. "Legit now. Construction, logistics, even donated to that foundation of yours. Anonymous, of course. I knew it was you. I figured." Another pause. This one wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. Earned. He reached across the table, resting his hand near hers but not touching. "You did it, Shania. You turned hell into something holy." She met his gaze. "You helped me survive it." "I didn't save you," he said quietly. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you how to fight." Her smile faded into something more serious. "I used to think survival was the end of the story. But it's not. It's just the start." He nodded, eyes softening. "Then what comes next?" She leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Choice." He frowned slightly. "Choice?" "Back then," she said, voice steady, "I was always someone's possession. Julian's wife, your project, a ghost in other people's wars. But now," she met his eyes with calm certainty, "now I choose." The room seemed to still. The rain, the lights, the quiet, all fading into background. He didn't speak for a long time, then softly, "And what do you choose?" Her answer came like a heartbeat. Peace, but not the kind that hides, the kind that stands in the open and breathes. He smiled faintly, something breaking open in his chest. "Then I burn with you." Her laugh was small, surprised and heartbreakingly real. "You always were too dramatic. Only for you." They sat there a while longer, talking about everything and nothing. About the women she trained, the men he'd rehired, the dreams they'd almost forgotten they could still chase. The world outside blurred, and for the first time, the rain didn't sound like running. It sounded like coming home. When the waiter brought their drinks, Wesley lifted his glass. To new beginnings. She clinked hers against his. To surviving the old ones. They drank in silence, eyes locked, both knowing they didn't need promises tonight. Just presence. Outside, lightning flashed, a soft white bloom over the skyline. The same city that once swallowed her now glittered like 1,000 second chances. As they rose to leave, he offered her his coat. She shook her head. "I'm not cold anymore." He smiled. "I know." They stepped into the rain together, unhurried, walking side by side down the glistening street. People turned to watch them pass. The woman who had been declared dead and the man once called a monster. Alive, unashamed, free. The wind carried the scent of wet earth and city lights. She tilted her head toward him, her voice soft but strong. "You ever wonder how we made it here?" He looked at her, rain darkening his hair. "Maybe it's not about how," he said. "Maybe it's about why." "And why's that?" "Because you were never meant to die in someone else's story." Her breath hitched, eyes glistening. He continued, voice quiet but sure. "You were meant to write your own." She smiled, her hand brushing his as they walked. "Then help me make it beautiful." He squeezed her fingers lightly. "Always." And somewhere between thunder and dawn, between the ghosts of who they were and the light of who they'd become, two people who had every reason to fall apart finally stood whole. Not saved by love, but reborn through it. Because love, real love, doesn't rescue. It rebuilds. Some women run to be found, others run to find themselves. But she ran into a monster's house and came out a legend. Do you believe love can grow from ruin? Comment your thoughts below.